That's nice. That's nice. Yes. Well, I told my daughter not to come. She's going to cost us $300. She's going to be there a couple days, and then she'll be leaving her kids.
I'm looking at the back of these. I think there's
The one won't listen to his older sister, of course, and then New Year's, and he's in high school. It didn't sound like a good thing to leave her, you know?
At least I drove.
Well,
There's a good
well, she lives in southern Alabama.
Before Christmas, I saw my husband's mom for a week in Arizona. But if we're going to go to Arizona, we try
And see some other things and new things.
to make it a full week.
Sure. Well, if you're going a distance, you don't want to just turn around and come back, you know.
Yeah, why don't I take one?
Sorry, these are, some of them are cut off. Looks like the old print cartridge needs replaced. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did them in a hurry yesterday afternoon. I thought I'll stash this away and remember to bring them this week. So much for that.
All right, give her a call.
A little bit of these are. Sorry about that.
Look who's here.
These are all cut out.
That's okay.
They're not printed properly. Sorry about that.
We'll get
It's
to
a thought that counts, right?
Yeah.
I should have checked it.
You've got a
I
crowd.
was in a hurry because I wanted to go.
I know, it's like Anderson.
Last week we only had 5, so 2
Well, I went to the library.
We have 9 El Torino, but
And so I saw it,
Yeah.
first restarted the printer.
Well,
and I went through and I thought, I'll pick these up.
That's
and
easy.
come back.
Go
Throw them away, don't look at them.
Times away, you know, those are the ones I would read.
Sorry about that.
I think
maybe yours for
blew us away too, and so they took up the possibilities.
What could be weird about finding my
Yeah, I got one. Yeah.
Universalist National Memorial Church in Washington, D.C. And they have Christmas Eve service. 2 ministers showed up in one concert. It's DC, so a lot of people commute way out
Yeah, I
by
guess.
train.
And so they don't come
They were
back.
just come back.
Yeah, at least at night too, you know.
Tentacles and vines and.
No, he's away.
Yeah.
So on vacation.
Okay.
Me too. Tim.
No, remind me after.
Sort of CBS.
My phone, I forgot last weekend. And my friend came to the house. Good morning. Came to the house to sleep on the hallway. I wasn't answering my phone, yeah. So as far as I'm gonna get to figure out. Oh, she was there.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this kind of dreary but unusually warm winter's day. We're kind of caught between Christmas and New Year's, so we're going to be doing between Christmas and New Year's. Derek is with us today, and he's speaking on Christmas. So we're going to have some Christmas influence, and then because New Year's is next Wednesday, we're going to throw that in too. So it'll be a kind of a mishmash. Any announcements? Okay, I tried to do a Christmas Eve service. Nobody cooperated. My computer didn't cooperate. The Facebook didn't cooperate. It kept blanking out on me. Part of that was my trouble. I wanted to show you the symphony from Dayton, the fancy one. Not Transylvania, whatever, you know what I'm talking about.
Trans-Siberian.
Trans-Siberian. And evidently that's copyright protected because it started playing and all of a sudden it just shut off and said, you can't play this. So, and I was up here, so I don't know how much of that didn't go. So if anybody saw any of that, you can let me know how mixed up and confusing it was. But I did get to show the end, which I may do again sometime. On the sleigh ride by Anderson, by the Boston Symphony, the orchestra members, the guys that play the trumpet, they put on a horse's head. You know at the end where it has the whinny? I'll play that again for you. He stood up with a horse's head on and did the whinny at the end. It is hilariously funny. So, all right, our welcome is 6:15 in your hymnal. The work of Christmas. When the song of angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the brothers, to make music in the heart. And that's by Howard Thurman. And I know Derek is going to refer to Howard, and I have a little thing I pulled off the internet. I hope it syncs with what Derek has. Will be our children's story. It's like 2 or 3 minute, a little history of what Howard Thurman thought and what he did. A pretty remarkable person who nobody has heard of before, including me. I hadn't heard of him before either. All right, our prelude. My shepherd will supply my needs. blessing that music is. We would be sorely in problems without our music. All right, our chalice lighting into the many coming years. We cannot know what all the year may bring, and would we heed the prophecy if we could? Bright flame, awake, send forth your shining light beyond this year into the many coming. Show us the ways of love and help and care, of justice, mercy, and equality. Illuminate unto the generations, show to the world a beacon of safe harbor. Help us to find the kindred warmth within us and among us. Help make it so. That's by Mary Sheldon. Our opening hymn is 237, the first Noel. I did look this up, and there is Noel and Noel. They are both equally appropriate, and Noel was used in England as an English translation of Noel, which was the Latin derivation or the Romantic language derivation. So it kind of depends on what your strength is or what your preference is. I grew up in the Presbyterian church, so it's Noel to me all the time. So that's what we're going to hear, 237. And our affirmation is, it matters. I knew a man who had printed on his stationery this proverb: nothing is settled, everything matters. It established a certain ambience for reading his letters, as if to say, what you are about to read is to be taken seriously, but it is not final. I remember him and his proverbs sometimes, especially when it seems impossible to change the world or myself in any significant way. Times like the beginnings of new years. Sorry, I say, it is not true that nothing is settled. In the past year, choices have been made. Losses have been suffered. There has been growth and decay. There have been commitments and betrayals. None of that can be undone. A year ago, no one knew whether during this year one person would become pregnant, another would get cancer, another would take a new job, another would have an accident, but now it is settled. One day this year I was present just when somebody needed me. Another day I was busy doing something else when I was needed. One day I said something to a friend that injured our relationship. Another day I said something that enabled a person to see life in a new way. The best and the worst of those days is now written. All my tears of joy or sorrow cannot erase it. The meaning of life is not contained within one act or one day or one year. As long as you are alive, the story of your life is still being told, and the meaning is still open. As long as there is life in the world, the story of the world is still being told. What is done, but nothing is settled. And if nothing is settled, then everything matters. Every choice, every act in the new year matters. Every word, every deed is making the meaning of your life and telling the story of the world. Everything matters in the coming year, and more importantly, everything matters today. All right, we'll see if our story on Howard Thurman will play.
For Black History Month, I'm talking about the work of one Black biblical scholar or theologian every day, and today is Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. Jesus and the Disinherited is an early work in the history of Black theology that emerged out of a series of sermons and lectures that Howard Thurman gave in the 30s and 40s, in which he tries to reinterpret the ethics of the New Testament in light of the African American experience of segregation in the United States. Jesus and the Disinherited was published just in time to be a significant influence on Martin Luther King Jr. and his ethic of nonviolent resistance, and it's interesting looking back now and seeing how much it also laid the foundations for future Black liberation theology. While the book is probably most famous for its influence on Martin Luther King Jr. and its opening chapter that talks about Jesus' ethic of nonviolent resistance, it's actually the last chapter on the topic of love of enemies that sticks with me the most. It is, of course, very easy to say, love your enemy, and it's also very easy for Christians of even modest privilege and lacking any real enemies to completely forget how radical a teaching this really is. It is, of course, much more difficult for an oppressed and hated group with a powerful enemy that is actively trying to hurt them both individually and systemically to say, love your enemies, and to put that ethic into practice. But that's exactly the situation that Jesus was in with respect to the Roman Empire, and that's exactly the situation that many Black religious leaders were in with respect to the United States government and huge swaths of the white population besides. And this is why it's so significant that Thurman emphasizes the love of neighbor, dedicates an entire chapter to it, and actually gives a very poignant reason why the oppressed should love their oppressors. There are really only two alternatives to loving our oppressors, either indifference or hatred. The problem with indifference is that it's really a betrayal of everyone the oppressor has ever hurt. Indifference also can't sustain the strength necessary to slowly dismantle oppressive systems over time. The problem with hatred is that over a long enough period of time, it will break down our moral sensibilities, making it very difficult for us to tell the difference between good and evil, and eventually preventing us from being able to relate to even the people we love the most. And so love of enemies emerges as a necessary survival strategy against an oppressor, and it allows an oppressed community to survive with both their morality and their strength and will to resist that oppression intact. I think advice for the oppressed is often a very difficult thing to hear, and if this were coming from anyone else, we'd probably dismiss it out of hand. But just because advice is difficult to hear or can make us uncomfortable doesn't mean that the advice is wrong, and I think Jesus and the Disinherited remains a valuable text to read.
All right? Hopefully you gathered something from that. Basically, the hard thing is to love your enemies. He realizes that, but Howard Thurman discussed how and why that is so important. All right, joys and concerns. Do we have any personal? Because you know we always have international.
Yeah. I'll share a series of 3.
Okay.
Concern, a joy, then a concern. The first concern is that today, if I understood things correctly, is the final worship service for the Methodist Church in El Dorado. They have voted to close, and it will be a significant loss to the community.
Yeah, they probably bought a lot of cheese balls, didn't they?
I don't know how many cheese balls they bought, but this does lead on to the next joy, which is thank you to everyone here in New Madison who did buy cheese balls from the El Dorado Universalist Church's women's group. We cleared a profit of $1,700 selling cheese balls. So, the Universalist Church in El Dorado, we sold $1,700 of profit in cheese balls.
And I can testify to the value and the taste of the cheese balls. For Christmas, we opened it up for the family, and we all started it, and it turned out it's Subaru dog approved because my dog surfed the counter and got the whole last half of the dang cheese ball.
No.
So, which
it is a
then
tasty cheese ball.
It was a tasty cheese ball, but unfortunately he presented it to us at 3 o'clock in the morning on the floor of the living room because that cheese went right through him like cheese through a dog. And it was sticky to clean up, I can tell you. All right, your third, sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's a little bit of humor. And the concern, without naming names, my husband and I are dealing with the reality that we have a member of our extended family who is dealing with a significant mental health problem that person is refusing to acknowledge. And it's provoking a lot of strain and conflict in the larger family.
Yeah. That is the most difficult to deal with. Mental health problems are the most difficult to deal with, and then resistance. I worked in a nursing home for a number of years, and I think I told you the pictures on the wall of these people in happy life with their family and on vacation and in Christmas, and then the angry, frustrated, striking out, not knowing that you're trying to help them. Just unbelievably sad for the family and for the people around them. And unfortunately, what happens is, if you saw in the news, in an Ohio penitentiary, they actually beat one of the inmates to death who was having a mental problem. And the guards, those people are human. They lose their temper when they're bitten and spitten on and kicked. They strike out, which they should not do, and they're not allowed to do, but they are human. And this one went too far, and the inmate died, which is a tragedy on all sides. So I guess we'll light a candle for the prison system. Israel, yes?
It's a joy for me to be able to be here this morning.
It's always a joy when you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
But it's a joy when you watch on Facebook or whatever and see what's going on. And every time you're not here, we're going to call and make sure you're okay. All right, Israel, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of a loss of identity to me. Israel just attacked and closed the last operating hospital in Palestine, in Gaza Strip. They went in and said it was being used by Hamas as a staging area, and they brought out as proof 2 handguns, 2 grenades, and a machete. That was the picture of the proof that they had at the hospital. And that could have been brought in by any of the workers in the hospital. I don't know what the grenades would have been for, but a machete and 2 handguns, I mean, that area is, everybody has a gun there. You couldn't hardly walk out the door and not find a gun on the ground. So I don't know, it's become blatantly and bald and scary what is happening not only to Israel, but what's happening to the basic population, the belief system in the entire world is trending toward, we don't care anymore, we're going to do what we do, might makes right, the end justifies the means. We are losing our moral compass, so we have a light for that. And then Ukraine, not good news there either. The Ukrainians have captured North Koreans, and they have published a diary of one of the North Korean soldiers. Another very sad situation, being forced to fight in another country because your government tells you to. We'll have to see what's going on there. And of course, then we have to light a candle for the 51st state, Canada, and maybe the 52nd state, Greenland.
And Panama.
And Panama. I forgot we want the Panama Canal back. We are embarking on and that's why we're looking at the new year and trying to encourage people to keep the faith and keep working, because the new year is going to be stressful no matter what happens. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, we must pray for our elected President Musk. Unbelievable. Oh, geez, that's not even funny. Please, be verbal.
And now there's a big division going on. They want the A14B or whatever they call they want to bring in the Indian workers, and of course the more working class say we don't, and they've been told no immigrants, and now they're being told, well, certain immigrants we want. But the hypocrisy there goes completely beyond, because every wife that our elected president had was an immigrant, and all of their relatives have been immigrants, and all they've been accepted. But we go astray there. All right, our last candle is for all those thoughts, those hopes, those dreams, those fears, those trepidations that are not spoken of. We are here to support you if we can in any way. All right. The message is The Work of Christmas by Derek. Let's see if I have a picture. Yes, this is Howard Thurman. I was really impressed by what I read about Howard Thurman for somebody I'd never heard of before.
It's always a joy to grace the pulpit here in New Madison. I even enjoy the drive up through New Paris, and even on a gloomy day, and see all your bright faces gathered together here. Thank you as well to the El Dorado Church for giving me the time to come up here. They're actually not having services today, taking a little rest from all their busyness. A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. And so the wise men left, and on their way they saw the same star they had seen in the east. When they saw it, how happy they were, what joy was theirs. It went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. They went into the house, and when they saw the child with his mother Mary, they knelt down and worshipped. They brought out their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and presented them. Then they returned to their country by another road, since God had warned them in a dream not to go back to King Herod. So if one's going to be very traditional, we are within the 12 days of Christmas. And so I'm going to wish you a Merry Christmas once again. On the ancient Christian calendar, Christmas was not a day, but was termed a season, lasting 12 days, Christmas tide. Much like Lent or Advent if you grew up Catholic or Lutheran, but shorter in duration than either of those seasons. Our culture, however, has largely turned Christmas into a single day, with a period of preparation that feels like it begins with some families and stores before Halloween. For me these particular days, these days between Christmas Day and New Year's, it usually feels a little bittersweet, a bit low, like coming down off a mountaintop experience, knowing that the regular rhythms of life are about to begin again as I descend back into the valley of work and everyday responsibilities. The generosity I get to see during Christmas and leading up to Christmas Day steadily evaporates back out into space. Food pantries that were well supplied leading up to Christmas will inevitably find themselves in very tight places come February because people have stopped giving. Will they have enough food for our family and neighbors who are struggling and hungry? I also think about all the human connections that take place during the lead up to Christmas and on Christmas Day itself. Phone calls, cards, visits from family and friends, good company on cold days and nights, but also quickly we all return to our daily responsibilities at home or at work, and despite our best intention, any number of those relationships are bound to be neglected. And for how long? Who knows? Until somebody dies, I hope not. Until next Christmas, I hope not as well, but sometimes that's just how things turn out. The world pulls at our attention, and so often we tell ourselves, yeah, we'll catch up with that friend over there, maybe next week. And sometimes the connection happens, but routinely it just gets postponed over and over again. We sing about peace on earth and goodwill to all people, but how long does it take for us to re-anesthetize ourselves and turn a blind eye to the violence in Ukraine or Gaza or Sudan, or even the violence that takes place close to home in Greenville or Richmond? Must it be this way? Must the spiritual quality of Christmas always give way to stinginess, loneliness, violence, and apathy? On the one hand, I'm going to admit to you that it is a challenge to be in a holiday state of mind every day. If I wake up with a sinus headache, which does happen from time to time, it is hard for me to raise up compassionate thoughts that extend anywhere beyond here. If the sewer line on my home is acting up again, or the roof develops a new leak, it's hard to think beyond my own immediate needs. And is there strife going on in my family? Well, it's hard to be generous and kind when you are working through your own anger. And I think you know from parallels in your own lives what I'm talking about in all these cases where we get pulled away from our high ideals. And yet, on the other hand, and you knew there would be another hand, there is a kind of hypocrisy that takes place in the wake of Christmas. When those who honor the birth of the Christ child born into poverty in a manger themselves show shallow disregard for the poor among us, even sometimes going so far as to demonize the poor as lazy, worthless. And people will intone in song phrases about the Prince of Peace, and then are indifferent to violent treatment of immigrants, transgender people, Jews, Palestinians, just to name a few. And sometimes, if they're extra hypocritical, they might even be just a bit eager for that bit of violence. Between the tension of the ideals of Christmas on one hand and the challenge of being human in a less than ideal world, is there another way forward? What if you and I could, carry just a little more of Christmas into our daily lives? Now, primitively, our Quaker neighbors did not observe Christmas Day. They held that all days were holy and that the money other people were spending on holiday luxuries would be better spent on the poor. There is some merit to that. But over time, even our Quaker neighbors began to celebrate Christmas Day and to be pulled off into worldly worries and distractions, because it takes a huge amount of spiritual discipline to treat all days as equally holy and to fill each and every one of them with our high ideals. The struggles of being human make it hard to keep this always at the front of our minds. Howard Thurman, the great African-American preacher and theologian, a generation older than Martin Luther King Jr., put his concern well in the poem that served as our opening words for today's worship. Because at some point, we stop singing the Christmas carols. We start looking at other things as the star in the sky fades. And the wise men, well, they're going to go back to their own homes by a different route than the one they first took. And when all of that is done, that, Howard Thurman says, is when we are needed the most. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to liberate the prisoners, to rebuild the nations, and to bring peace among people. So what if there is another way forward? A way that is something other than a perfectionism that we cannot possibly reach, that perfectionism where we are in that ideal holiday spirit every single day of the year. And another way that is something other than a hypocritical spirituality that mouths niceties for one day and then does something else the rest of the year. I want to incorporate more of the themes and the spirit of Christmas into my daily life all year round, while also acknowledging that I am not going to get it perfectly or do it all every day, but to practice a little more generosity than what I might be reflexively inclined to do. To be a little more mindful of the human connections needing my attention, even as I admit that I cannot realize all of them with perfection. I'm not going to be able to stay in touch with everyone as often as I really want to. They could be a little bit better. To practice peacemaking in my daily life, especially amid the cruelties of our present-day culture. I want this spirit of Christmas to be not simply toil or to become some kind of burdensome duty, but a joy. To take the joyful blessings that I have been able to taste in Christmas stories, in relationships, in gatherings like these, and to share that with others with some happiness in my heart. This is the gift of Christmas, when we are able to keep giving and receiving it through other days of the year, even knowing that you will have days when you just don't feel up to it. But not every day is going to be a day when you don't feel up to it. So joy to the world, peace on earth, goodwill to all. Hope on these things and live these things. Merry Christmas, my dear friends. So as I often say at the El Dorado Church, but I get to say this here too, we have this practice, and it's not unique to those two churches, but it's not that common either, because the message shared is shared with the gathered community, and you have your own part of the message to bring. Insights you have to share to build one another up in insight and wisdom, as well as questions you have. And also, I'm willing to entertain questions about this guy, because he is far more fascinating than I think he deserves. Or at least as he's gotten, he's been very much overshadowed by Martin Luther King Jr. Tim mentioned the influence that he had on Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be traveling, carried a copy of Jesus and the Disinherited in his briefcase all the time. And it's a fascinating book to read. And I could also say more about that, but I won't. Not quite yet. So what is on your hearts and minds, this space between Christmas Day and New Year's, this Christmas tide, these 12 days of Christmas?
I think we need to, I guess we will look a little more into Howard Thurman and peaceful resistance, given the picture of what the new year is shaping up to be. Best prepared, I guess, is the motto. And I did not know, I had not even heard the name Howard Thurman before, so I'm really looking forward to either if you can bring more information or I will see what I can.
I could do another sermon another time on Howard Thurman. He was a prolific best-selling author during his lifetime. The UUA holds the copyright on Jesus and the Disinherited.
Really?
Yes. The authorized copies can be bought from Beacon Press. I have a copy at home with a lot of little scribbled annotations in it. A little history of the book. The book came out of an experience he had in the 1930s. He was traveling in Sri Lanka and had a conversation with somebody who was indigenous, not one of the British colonial authorities. And that Sri Lankan asked him, he said, well, I'm a person of color, and you are a person of color. How can you possibly adopt the religion of the people who enslaved your ancestors and conquered our country? And Howard was like, yeah, you got a good point. I need to think about this one. And Howard spent time reading the gospel stories about Jesus and came away with it, with a sense that Jesus had something to say to the people who have their backs against the wall. And part of it is because he lived in a time of Roman military occupation. He was not a person of privilege. And if there's anything to the story, he was born in a shed. Less than ideal circumstances, and simply because Roman authorities wanted people counted a certain way. which may not have actually quite happened that way, but it's plausible. So Howard Thurman wrote Jesus and the Disinherited. It was developed out of some lectures and some smaller things he wrote. But he talked to people who have their backs against the wall about, one, not believing the lies that the oppressor tells, including the lies that get told about you. Two, not living your life in constant fear. Courage is what is required. Jesus did not live his life in total fear every day, neither should you. And third, do not give in to the anger and hatred of those who oppress you, because that hound will devour you alive. And he had a very vivid explanation of this in his book. He recounts being on a train in the Deep South in the 40s. And as this train, I don't know where he was going, transitioned out of whatever northern state into whatever southern state it was going, the train stopped, and all the black passengers had to be herded into the back, opening up the good seats for the white passengers who boarded the next station. And as Howard was sitting in his seat, and there were two little black girls in the seat in front of him, they could look out the train window at that next station, and there were two white girls going around the parking lot on roller skates. And one of the little black girls in front of him said, "I hope one of those white girls falls and bashes in her nose." And Howard thought, what a horrible, horrible thing to take root in the mind of a 5-year-old child. That much anger, that much hatred. And how is that going to gnaw at that girl for the rest of her life? Yeah, he has so much to say.
Yeah, we need a Sunday on that.
Yeah, I'll bring back Howard. Yeah.
And in conjunction with that, we showed the movie The Green Book here some months ago.
Oh yeah.
I would highly recommend anybody, you can get The Green Book either, well, you can't get it from Redbox or anyplace else now, but you can probably get it streaming online. Highly recommend that movie as an example of what it was like to go through the South and deal with a black artist going through the South, dealing with that frustration and anger.
Who here knows what a green book is? Yeah, good. So if you're black and traveling, you need to know where it was safe for you to stay or eat, or in some cases, even drive through. And it wasn't entirely a Southern thing. If you go to Elwood, Indiana, Elwood was a sundown town. It was a crime to be black within city limits after dark. And my husband knows an older African-American man from his church whose brother died in Elwood because his brother was in a traffic accident, sustained very bad injuries, and the ambulance would not transport him to the nearest hospital because Elwood was a sundown town. Yeah.
All right, we swung up about, as usual, 7 or 8 different doors open in spirit of full revelation. I am not the original Bah Humbug, but I'm damn close. Christmas is a joke. It's become a joke. And I'm just going to share a few things that I've thought about and that I've seen, and it's just gotten worse. For example, now you walk into a retail store at the end of September, and what do you see? Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, all lumped together. Now, I worked in retail and display for a number of years. Now, in those years, we waited until the second week of November before we even thought about ordering the Christmas decorations for the 9 stores that I was in charge of. Now that tells you something if you think about it for a second. There's an interesting meme that's going around. Guys talking about Charles Dickens, and so he's talking to someone and they said, well, what is it you learned by reading A Christmas Carol, Dickens' Christmas Carol? And the guy said, well, what I learned was it takes a supernatural terrorist to change the welcome kitchen. Then I'm thinking about this here. This is a fascinating period of human history and American history that's totally ignored. The period between 1918, right after the First World War, literally through the 40s and into the 50s and 60s, morphing into what we call the Civil Rights Movement, started way before that. And this gentleman was a big part of it. That is, they tried so many different ways to get their message across and failed miserably constantly. But they never gave up, and that's the interesting part.
And I will point out, Howard Thurman had some big successes. His books became bestsellers. And interestingly, beyond his lifetime, Jesus and the Disinherited has become a book that has had a huge influence on non-Black people who have had their backs against the wall, particularly women who found themselves aggressively discriminated against and sometimes subjected to violence, the gay and lesbian community, and immigrants. He also, for a time, served as Dean of Marsh Chapel at Boston University, which was a very high-profile pulpit. And then his final big project was founding in the city of Los Angeles the Church for the Fellowship of All People, which still exists, which was, particularly during his lifetime, a very high-profile, significantly noticed by the public, in part because of how radical that church was. He founded it as an integrated church from the get-go. And that was so controversial at the time that Black and white and Asians would be worshiping together in the same church on purpose. There were people who found it scandalous. They might start dating each other.
Just 2 more.
Yes.
Just 2 more. One, I have been thinking along 2 lines, and I've been working on a story, thinking about a story, what have you. And it's one of the things that during the Christmas season we ignore, and I think it ties into the other question. We've known about this concept of peace and taking care of one another for how many tens of thousands of years, okay? And specifically, we had a Christian message on the same thing for, almost 3,000 years now, about 2,500, if you will, okay? And nothing's changed. Now, in most worlds, when that happens, you would look at it and you would say, we're not doing something right. Something's not working. And we have to pay attention to it and figure out what it is that's not working so that we can be successful as we go on. And yet, we refuse to do that. Okay?
I would also add that we have these moments in time where we get it right, but then one generation moves on and the next one doesn't remember. And we end up having to relearn those mistakes over and over again, which is why I think partially we need some kind of reminder.
We need some kind of reminder as it goes through. And I will add the last thing that I've been thinking about. Part of the problem is, and Christmas encapsulates that, is the fact that our deity is some kind of an abstraction. Okay, that is there all the time, but we can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't taste it, we can't do anything, we just manufacture this. I just saw another one recently where this guy thinks Jesus is actually alive today. Okay, and that's fine if you want to think that way. If he's a star traveler, he probably still is on a spaceship someplace trying to get there back. Okay, but I'm not going to go that far with it. What I'm beginning to realize is that you have to recognize the moments in time in which you have experienced something that brought you close to the divine. And so that means there are actions and thinkings, and we should be looking at those experiences. Okay, and defining those experiences. What was it in your life, for example, okay, where you learned that you were as good as everybody else? What was that made that clear in your mind? Now, to me, that's a moment of coming to terms with the divine.
Yep.
Okay, and that's what it's all about, and that's what we don't focus on.
Where, how, when were you inspired to be your better self? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what your sermon opened up for me today as I was sitting here thinking along.
Among the things it could open, I'm glad it's one of those.
There you go.
As the Quakers say, are all hearts and minds free to continue? Then Tim and I will do the switcheroo.
And don't hesitate if you have something to say, a thought that you want to pass along or need to share. Don't hesitate to do that. We are not constrained by the clock here. If you need to leave, please leave anytime. That's not a problem, but feel welcome to stay as long as you like. Community is what we strive to build, and community is built on sharing ideas and thoughts and everything that you have. So always feel free to do that. All right, offering. If you have something to put in, please drop it in the plate. If you need something, let us know. Doxology?
Oh, okay.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, by every tongue.
Good deal. All right. All right. Our closing hymn is 231, Angels We Have Heard on High.
Angels we have heard
distinguishing the chalice is 560 in your hymnal. Commitment. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do. That's by Dorothy Day. Postlude. Leave our one candle lit, as we always do, for those hopes and prayers, those concerns you have for others, and for those joys, hopefully, that came through Christmas, and hopefully that will continue through New Year's. I did this before, and I just get a big kick out of it. Wouldn't that be an experience of a lifetime? That is a riding stable in Michigan called Ride and Shine. For a small fee, you can ride a horse lit up like that through the woods. And they also have sleigh rides, so I may be taking a trip up there. All right, there are donuts and coffee. Enjoy yourself, create that community and sustain that community. Have a good year, drive safely. I see Montgomery County, the sheriff is offering a free Uber ride if you're somewhere and you can't get home because you've been drinking. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't drink, so I hope not.
My brother and my mom have the system where you text my mom once a day.
Okay.
Proof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not so much. My concern is that, you know, I get easily have to turn in with one of those.
Could you hear all right?
I want to went down. Good. Somebody's tearing down the house and they find something. And I don't really care because when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. But regardless, there are some people in my life who will be.
You're not allowed to see in this.
Yes, exactly. There are a few where that is.
Well, you have that habit where there was a past friend who passed away.
Oh, yeah.
And like it was months before April.
Yeah, right. And she was one of those that had agreed, and I called, and I didn't answer, and I went over, I took
proof of life.
Okay, well, you text me, you got my number, or?
I think I got it in the directory.
That's fine, just text me so I have your number and I will text you back. So we'll just do that for a while. I'm not expecting any decision, but then again, you just don't know. Yeah, well, I'm willful enough that frankly.
You could also be in a situation where your phone is somewhere else and for some reason you're on the floor again.
Exactly, well.
And my mom had that happen once.
Yeah, well, what I was about to say.
Mom had a bad medication interaction
Oh, yeah.
like totally gave her like nonstop fertilizing.
Well, see, that's what I am at the moment. I get these weird times of nausea for no reason. And then I sneeze and it's gone. So it's real weird. No, it starts down here. I can feel it down here. This is where the nausea is. I think that's what the issue is, frankly. I'm coming to that conclusion, and there's nothing they can do about it. So
I had a single episode one day, so once. Right now.
yeah, exactly.
El Correo Methodist.
Yes.
Where are they going to go? Are they going to join up with?
Well, they have to share the minister, so my guess is that most of the Methodists in El Dorado